let's get the show on the road. Thank you so much for attending in this pandemic conditions. And it's good to see some familiar faces. I just want to first off saying that, I know it's been a weird year, and I think this is hopefully the beginning of the end of that long, dark tunnel. But I want to make sure everybody, please still stay safe, because we're not quite to the end of that tunnel yet. And so I'm glad everybody's wearing masks. So with that being said, welcome. The focus of this panel is the pharmacology of CBD and hemp. And it's called a full 1-1 on pharmacology. And so with that said, please allow me to introduce myself. Michael Chang. I'm I'm a physician that has a strong interest in hemp and the CBD world. I'm an emergency physician, so my world has been rocked by COVID, as most everybody else here in this room. And so again, it is good to see that everybody is now beginning to tiptoe back into this world, because there is the end of that light, the end of the tunnel, and we will get back to where we used to be, and be strong advocates of this product, and to push forward the science and pharmacology behind it, so that we can get it out to the rest of the world. My background, as I said, is in emergency medicine, and I have a hemp business in Huntsville, Alabama, along with one of my other ER colleagues. And so we grow, and we have a retail outlet there as well. And so it is certainly a little bit, it's more of a disclaimer, I should say. So I'm biased, I'm sorry. So hopefully that doesn't make me any less credible. But we have here some very esteemed colleagues of ours who have been in the hemp and the CBD world for quite a while, and has a lot of expertise and knowledge to offer. So let me first introduce Dr. Jeff Conan. There he is. He's a clinical professor at the College of Nursing and Health Sciences at Florida International University, and he's a clinician. He specializes in sports medicine and all its performance and nutrition and well-being and rehabilitation that all goes with that title. And so he's well-versed in the clinical side of things, as well as a lot of sports medicines outside of that. Then next to him is our Chip Paul. There he is. He's a forensic researcher and an endocannabinoid health scientist. He is with New Pharma and True Medics. And he has a very interesting project of using the endocannabinoid diagnostic testing, which I hope he can touch upon, because it's certainly very interesting to me anyways, as a clinician. And then next to him down there is a doctor? Is that right? Dr. Israel Garcia. He's a synthetic organic chemist locally.
Yes.
And he is a director of chemistry, R&D, and quality control at Bayou City Hemp, which just opened its doors just not too long ago. Yeah. Excellent. And so he is going to take a lot of some basic science part of things, I'm sure.
Sure.
And then we have next to me here, Mr. Michael Sandoval. He is with Santa Labs in Austin. He's the president, right, of the lab, and he is responsible also in part for the product development, on-site manufacturing, and third-party testing of hemp and hemp products, and have I hope a fair amount of experience and expertise that he does in some of the CBD delivery systems and nanotechnology. So with that said, we obviously have a very qualified group here to answer a lot of questions, and hopefully this will be a very free-flowing discussion. And please, the audience, if you have any questions, please let us, raise your hand. The goal of this panel, I want to touch upon at least, the pharmacokinetics and the pharmacodynamics of the endocannabinoid system and CBD. So that's what we to the clinical applications that we all kind of all have an inkling of, and hopefully we'll get some latest science on that. And then we'll drill down into the weeds in terms of the delivery system, how to best formulate certain medications, and how to best time it, give it, and all that good stuff. So with that said, let's discuss the endocannabinoid system, which is obviously our favorite system, and how it relates to hemp and the world that we know. So with that said, Chip, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Mike, and thank you very much for that introduction for all of us. As said, my name and we do that in conjunction with a major university, University of Mississippi. So what is this endocannabinoid system? Let's talk about that real quick, because we're talking about the pharmacology of the system, but that's how it works inside of us. So if you take something like a CBD, you're affecting several internal systems inside of you, right? So how does that work? Well, let's talk about that real quick. So 3 points about the endocannabinoid system that I think you'll find are somewhat important. So point 1 about it, it's really, really old. We developed it in something called a sea squirt. We were the first little guy in the bottom of the ocean to move. Brup, brup, brup. We had a tail, we had a little bit of a stomach, we had an exoskeleton, we had an endocannabinoid system, we had a fat layer, and we had a little bit of a central nervous system. But that's where we developed an endocannabinoid system. From that guy, insects went one way, everything else on the planet went the other way. For the most part, everything else on the planet has dragged an endocannabinoid system up the evolutionary ladder. So your dog has one, your cat has one, your fish has one, your bird has one. Very common, okay? The endocannabinoid system is very, very common. Second point about it, it's looking to be our master regulatory system. You can go out to nih.gov and satisfy yourself to the amount of research, go down any silo, immune, feeding and craving, skin, hundreds of thousands, if not thousands, of research papers. As you read those, all those guys will, for the most part, agree that it regulates their particular silo of human function. What does that mean? It means you work kind of like a car, okay? So we understand that our vehicle has a computer in it. That computer is always trying to manage everything in our car to perfect homeostasis. We need gas, we need windshield wiper fluid. What things do we need? How do we balance our carburetor properly? All this stuff is managed by the computer system in our car. Well, guess what? We work the same way. We have a hypothalamus hippocampus. It uses the endocannabinoid system for the most part as its mechanism of action to be able to control and manage everything about you for the most part. Every regulatory function about you is somehow involved with the endocannabinoid system. Every cell in your body will express a hook for the endocannabinoid system. So point 2, look at it be our master regulatory. Point 3 about it, best point I think, it's driven and fed by have the ability to build a supplement or take cannabinoids. You have to adjust in this system to your diet, right? So it's diet based. We just don't understand this well enough. We will soon, and that's why we're teaching about the pharmacology of this, is how this works inside of us. So 1, 2, 3 is very old, very ancient, looking to be our master regulatory, and it's driven and fed by natural resources, of which CBD is almost a perfect supplement for what's wrong with us right now.
Let me pretend like I'm an audience. And why, Chip, why is it that CBD is so good for so many different disease entities? Why is it so good for sleep? Why is it good for inflammation? Why is it good for an immune system? Why is it good for, just...
That's a great question. So right now, if you look at diet, and you look at what the resources are for this endocannabinoid system. So how do we get more of these resources to be able to better control our body? It has to do with our intake of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And that intake of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids has to be in a certain range, 1:1 to 1:5, 1:4. We're at 1 to 20 right now. And you can't do better unless you supplement. You can't go to McDonald's full of corn syrup, full of corn oil, all that stuff. 1 to 20, 1 to 20, 1 to 20. When we're at 1 to 20, omega-3, omega-3 side, and it really helps us balance the omega-3s that we're missing in our diet.
That's a good point, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that CBD is a receptor in the cannabinoid system. It is basically everywhere in our bodies.
Yes.
It's in our brains, as I said. It's in our blood. It's in our hearts. It's everywhere, and so that's why CBD has so much effect in different organ systems, depending on what you're looking for. So, with that said, Dr. Conan, do you want to take it away in terms of the clinical applications?
Yeah, so where Chip and I are is like this far apart, right? He's figuring out at the basic science level, and I'm what I call the end user level. So I work with athletes primarily at all different levels, professional sports, collegiate, et cetera. And what they do in our world is they walk up to me with something and say, what is this? Can I use it? Will it work? And the reason why we don't know is you can go back only 3 years ago. And in every sport level, when that would happen, the person answering the question in my shoes would say, it doesn't matter, you can't take it. You're going to be drug tested for it, or we don't know what it's going to do, and I'm not going to be legally responsible for telling you to put it in your body. And why is that? Well, it's because most of us in healthcare were brought up in a couple of key facts. Number one, anything that comes from this plant is illegal. And so that's just what we were taught. Number two is that, like we heard earlier, the fact of the matter is that it was easy for me to tell somebody this. I didn't have to think. I can just say, well, don't put it in your body. And I wasn't held accountable. But now, in all of our sports levels, and let me give you one example. And this is for actually for THC testing, but it's really important. You can see how things are changing along the landscape in sport. The NCAA used to, as recent as 2 years ago, test athletes for marijuana in their system. If you were caught, and I think it was 10 NGs was the level, it was a 1 year penalty. 1 year penalty. Coaches came back to the NCAA because this is money. Players were getting suspended all the time. And they said, all these kids we're recruiting, they're coming from households that all forms of cannabis are normal. We can't do this anymore. We won't have teams. And this is TV money. So the NCAA 2.5-fold increased the sensitivity level of testing and removed the penalty from 12 months to 6 months. Last week, I got a call from a couple of what's called Power 5 schools that said, Jeff, will you sit on a panel? It's time for us to go talk to the NCAA and get rid of this altogether. So the landscape is changing, and there's a little bit more receptiveness. But the third point I want to make briefly is the fact that when we went to school, we weren't taught the endocannabinoid system. So how am I supposed to believe as a healthcare provider telling my athletes whether this works or not and how it works, and I wasn't even taught what it was? So what I do, I come to a lot of these conferences, and when you come into the rooms here, what 99.9% of us are believers or followers or whichever word you want to use, like we drink the Kool-Aid. But when I go to the healthcare conferences, it's me. And I'm trying to educate everyone else in the audience who is ready to tell me why I'm full of you know what when I'm standing up here talking. And I get a minute to give them my elevator pitch on the endocannabinoid system. Well, you didn't learn the nervous system in school in 1 minute or even 1 hour. So I have to do my best to just get them to slightly buy in to start learning more. Now, when that buy-in occurs, this connection between Chip and I will come closer and closer and closer. Because now, as he figures out how it works, I can say, well, for my people who are in performance, they want to sleep better, they want inflammatory issues to respond better, et cetera, what is it that I need to do and take and what dosage, et cetera, to help with that?
Excellent point. And this kind of resistance is endemic in medicine. You know, they say that it takes usually 15 years for a discovery to go to the translate to the bedside. 15 years. But it's a lot of casualties in those 15 years. So that's one of those things that I think it's gonna come, and data is gonna be there. We just need to make sure we have the right tests and studies in place to convince the powers that be, so to speak, right? And we can certainly get into the specifics of clinical applications, maybe as a question, because obviously that's probably a 10-day course in of itself in clinical application. So, it's definitely a slippery slope. But let's go down to the kind of more the minutia in terms of the applications of the pharmacology, literally, in terms of formulations, liposolubility issues, carriers. That maybe we should discuss a little bit of that. Maybe we'll start off with Dr. Israel there.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm Dr. Israel Garcia, work at a company locally here. It's called BioCity Hemp. We do CO2 extraction, and I'm basically the director of chemistry, R&D, product development, quality control. Known as a product, it's an oil when you extract it from the plant, and it ends up being an extract, or you can have it as an isolate, as pretty much a crystal of it, right? But the problem, as you probably all figured out, our bodies, and correct me if I'm wrong, most of our bodies is like 60% or 70% water. If you put oil into water, you know what happens. It doesn't really get absorbed or dissolved in water. So there's many products out there that they can claim are the best in everything, but we face that first encounter that, okay, so we all want to use products with not just CBD, but maybe all the other minor cannabinoids that come out on an extraction from the hemp plant. But then you realize, well, what's the best? What works best for me? And that's probably the best question here. What works best for you? Because something that might work wonderful for me, it might not even do anything to you, or it might just slightly do something to you. So we have to pay attention to like all these products we have available, which I know for experience that everybody claims they have the best product, the best absorption, the best response. So I bet you all aware on how long a clinical study takes. This year was the best proof. The vaccine, the COVID vaccine took a year, and it's aggressive because I've never seen something like that before in my life. So now imagine if we want to do studies on any of these products to figure out, let's say, for example, bioavailability. That's one of the major steps that we need to figure out with all of these products, because really, yeah, you can buy a supplement, you can buy something that they claim it works for you, but really, does it work for anyone the same way? No, most likely don't. So there's a lot of studies out there which they claim that certain products have certain bioavailability, so they have done studies, let's say on tinctures and gummies, edibles, other stuff. And of course, there's many, many different products out there. So we have to pay attention on that if we really want to control dosage. Because for all these studies that you guys are doing, that you're presenting athletes with probably a new product or trying to understand the endocannabinoid system, sometimes if you feed the endocannabinoid system with a small amount of certain cannabinoid, it might work wonderful. But if you go to the other side, overdose it, it might just give you the completely opposite effect. So there's things that we need to consider about all these products formulations and what is going to end up doing to us basically for what we're consuming it. We know it's a supplement. It's not a cure. Remember that. It's a supplement that is basically going to help us in certain ways. And we all know many different applications for CBD. Now, lately, we have seen, for example, CBG products or CBN products or a mixture of all of them, which definitely they're going to have all completely different properties. So if you're trying to find out a new product that helps you with X, Y, or see how it works. Yeah, but maybe I feel sleepy, and I don't want that throughout the day. I just want to feel relaxed, or I don't know. There's many, many different properties of all these products. So what I would say is like, we need to be aware of all these products and where they're coming from first, what are their contents, and really if they are what they're claimed they are. And I guess I'm just pretty much passing the baton to our next speaker, which that testing analysis is probably one of the pivoting points on this industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that insightful comments. And, it does speak to the high degree of variability. So many variables that's involved in this, because CBD is being a lipophilic, compound, meaning fat-loving. It does take, timing is an issue, eating it with or without food, what kind of food, and all that stuff. So even you can layer in circadian rhythms, dosage and body, everybody's a little different sensitivities-wise, And so there is a lot of variables that you have to try to control. And that's what makes this very challenging. And the fact that, in the cannabinoid system, I'm going to call it, quote, a dirty system, meaning it's everywhere, And as such, it can affect a lot of different organ systems. And so, testing quality is one of those things you just don't want to take for granted. So with that said, Michael Sandoval is going to talk a little bit about his what he does in terms of quality control, and even different type of formulations that he's involved with, and give us some insights.
Cool. Mind if I share your
Oh
microphone?
yes, absolutely. There you go.
Thank you, Michael. And my name is Mike Sandoval. I'm president of Sante Labs. I'm substituting for Dr. Brian Sloat, who is our chief scientific officer with the company. His physician told him he's a high-risk individual, so he wanted to take all the precautions he needed. I'll try to speak for him, but not as eloquently as he does. So I lead a team of drug delivery experts and analytical chemists. And what we do at Sante is that we help small companies as well as mid and some larger pharma take their drugs from start to finish. So a lot of the clinicians to the right of me, have an idea. They have a compound that is incredibly water insoluble, that needs help absorption or potentially targeting, and then we would help them prove out the concept. To get into clinical trials, there's a lot of development needs that are required, what the FDA would need to substantiate safety, as well as demonstration of pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, not necessarily that early, but safety. Made regarding the importance of delivering these highly water-insoluble compounds like CBD, and it doesn't absorb very well by itself. The illustration that he made is CBD is an oil. A lot of the oils that he produces at Bio, don't mix with water, and that's okay. And this is where you see the rise of this non-traditional pharmaceutics. And the non-traditional pharmaceutics is the use of nanoemulsions, liposomes, nanoparticles, et cetera, that help boost the absorption of CBD or other lipophilic compounds to get it into the body, to get it to the brain. And there's a lot that goes into it. And what we do at Sante is to help understand the science. Transforming the science into breakthroughs is real important to us. And for these drug delivery systems, characterizing how fast it releases from this delivery system, how shelf stable that delivery system is. CBD is not stable on its own. There's a lot of, as a testing lab as well, because we are a CDMO that does research, commercialization, drug development, and third-party testing, we see a lot of products that are struggling on the market today, and shelf life is an important component of that. I think what the industry needs to understand, and a lot of the consumers and the brands that we work with, is what is the mechanism of degradation? How is CBD degrading over time? And as we start seeing this transformation into the low-dose CBD market, a lot of these highly concentrated oil formulations may start to phase out. So it's going to start turning into more of these novel delivery systems, as what Dr. Garcia is making at his facility. And with that, you need to boost absorption, but you also need to ensure shelf life to be competitive on the marketplace.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, aren't you all so glad you learned so much within the last 30 minutes? Great. So now it's time the audience participation. What questions do you all have? Yes, sir.
You were just talking about shelf life, so that would naturally be adding a preservative. Are there certain preservatives that you would say are better or worse, and is there reasoning behind that?
Yes, absolutely. So preservatives are, and there's many different types of preservatives. Naturally, you'll want to use the food grade, food safe preservatives, and there's many of them. But the choice of preservative is going to be dependent on the pH of your formulation. And one of the first things that we were taught in at School of Pharmacy at UT was if you have a formulation that contains more than 60% non-water, so like an oil or syrup, you traditionally don't need a preservative. So a lot of these oil formulations, from our testing perspective, we don't see a lot of issues with preservation. However, when you go to these water-based formulations, the use of surfactants or other nanoemulsions, preservation is incredibly important because you have a lot more water in a system that needs it. So we like using sodium benzoate, potassium sorbate because it is very effective. We always recommend like a 2-component preservative system because not all will be effective against fungi and mold. You kind of need both. But shelf life we define shelf life together. So shelf life is not just a function of whether there's antimicrobial prevention. It could be also how stable CBD is there physical instabilities.
Yeah, oh no, that's really good. And there's also natural products, that will offer. So if you're combining, some natural products, like we did shelf life studies on some of our stuff that had a lot of ginger in it. Ginger turns out is a very good antimicrobial and really adds to sustainability. So it's, it's just kind of depends on what you're using. But we use a lot of citric acid too, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, yes.
Can I take yours?
Yeah, go for it.
We can share.
Yeah.
Oh, you got, okay, I didn't realize there was, there they are.
Yeah.
Who's next?
Yeah, my question is this: what is the connection between the name of the cannabis plant and the endocannabinoid system? I mean, did the recognition of the system come first, or the plant, and then we were named after the plant?
Absolutely, the plant came first. In cannabis is really characterized by 3 different strains: Cannabis indica, Cannabis sativa, and Cannabis rudialis. The endocannabinoid system was discovered over time. It started being discovered in 1940 by a guy named Roger Adams, who characterized really the cannabinoids, that were in cannabis. But since that time, it sort of slowly developed. It started accelerating in about 1992. So researchers found that we had these receptors in our brain that had affinity for THC. And then they discovered that we actually had something inside of us that acted like THC called anandamide. And really that discovery was what started the whole discovery of the endocannabinoid system. But it's interesting, people always trigger, when you talk about the endocannabinoid system, it's got to do something with cannabis, but it's about in the same way that when you talk about your endorphin system, it has to do with morphine, okay? So cannabis was kind of used to discover it and map it out, but it's way more than just cannabis. Cannabis is a great way to supplement it and modulate it, but it's a lot more than that.
Thank you.
Questions?
We have a nano-emulsified oil, and we were curious, I guess, what's your opinion on shelf life of nano-emulsified oil?
Well, I can.
Does that give it more time, shelf life?
Right.
Take away? Does it break down from
So
the
I can
nano?
I can actually describe a little bit more because we actually at BioCity we have our own nanoemulsion product, and besides the commercial, stop by our booth. We have a couple of samples. You can try it, but really the shelf life depends a lot on what you're making off of your nanoemulsion. A lot of people claim that the smaller the size of your drops of oil in water, the more stable it could be for just physical purposes, not necessarily. Shelf life could be described in many different ways, whether it's degradation of your cannabinoids in your emulsion, or basically just a broken. It's like milk, like water, cloudy type of thing. Okay. So there's many different ways that you can describe degradation of a nanoemulsion. So most of the time, and I would say for nanoemulsions to be quite stable, you need to work below 100 nanometers of size of the oil drops. that's not an easy task to accomplish. So if I could say stability on physical properties of the emulsion, that's probably the major one. Now there's others like the preservatives like they just mentioned before, or other kind of additives like the emulsifiers or surfactants that you use in your emulsion that will play a big role in stability.
I see.
So far in the product we have stability, and it's kind of weird because a lot of people call it infinite stability, but infinity basically is the time you've been making it and it hasn't been degraded or separated or broken down. So until the point it doesn't happen, then you can say like, you don't have really a shelf life on it. But it's kind of deceiving, right? I mean,
Right,
you can get a product that they tell you, well, this is gonna never decompose, really. Well,
Yeah.
you probably haven't had it on your shelf enough to see when it decomposes. But
Sure.
as long as they don't see it before they sell it and the consumer consumes it first, then there's no way to know unless you keep it for a long time and or do your
Then go do
accelerated
another test.
studies, which all of that, it plays a big role. But I would say mainly for the emulsions, the particle size plays a big role.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll follow up to Dr. Garcia. I mean, physical and chemical stability is what you're going to be monitoring, but excipient selection is important, and like processing parameters. You know, making a surfactant-based emulsion, we could do it in 15 minutes. It's not very difficult when it comes to if you get a good balance of your surfactants and water and oil ratios. It's one of the first things you're taught in school with that. So selection's important, how you operate it or how do you process it. You know, there's sonication versus high pressure homogenization. There's solvent evaporation, whether you're using polymeric excipients. So I think the monitoring, performing the shelf life studies is important. And, you know, if you don't, I agree with there are formulations that claim to be infinite stable. However, I would challenge the analytical method because if your analytical method is not stability indicating, you know, meeting ICH-Q2, there's no way to definitively say that your product is stable or not if your method does not pick up impurities or degradation. And there's a lot of formal and stability studies that you could do to prove out how your drug or how CBD will degrade in your formulation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so you said, thank you. It's important what analytical method you use to test your shelf life. For those of us that this is going, you know, a little over our head, if we contact a company and tell them we want to test our shelf life, are there different analytical methods we should be?
There's and
How do I
again
make sure we're doing the
he'll
right
answer
one?
he'll answer this more technically, but I'll just there's FDA guidelines that you can go by. So like if you do a natural product, you know, in the normal FDA world, you should test that for sustainability. I can't remember what it is after a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, you know, things like that. So there are tried and true methods. It's on you as a manufacturer to have some kind of quality assurance program so that if the FDA came in or ever regulated it, they'd say it's on you, but you better prove that you've got some kind of sustainability program to protect consumer safety. So, and then I'll throw it to you for the more specific.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of the companies in the market today are, you know, virtual companies. So they will outsource manufacturing to a co-man that will then release product to the manufacturer or to the brand. You know, even though the manufacturer is releasing the product, it's still up to the brand to release it to market. So this is where, you know, signing off for retail sale is important. This is where it's the responsibility of the brand to ensure that you have a stable product, a safe product at the very least, and meeting the supplement facts. You know, what you say on your product is what's in your product. So from a lot of labs have analytical methods, and I think you're starting to see more labs offer shelf life testing. You know, it's something that we've been doing for over a decade it's for formal drug applications. So not all analytical methods are the same, and there's not a one-size-fit-all method. The same as there's not a one-size-fit-all drug delivery system that could take cannabinoids and render them water miscible, shelf-stable, or even absorbable. So the choice of the method's important. I would encourage you to find a lab that doesn't necessarily have such an expanded multi-component cannabinoid assay. I mean, because you lose accuracy and precision with multiple analytes on your chromatography. So if you're going to do a formal stability study, I would recommend to do forced degradation studies to ensure that that analytical method is suitable for your formulation, and only look at what you're putting on your principal display panel. So if you're only claiming CBD, don't look at the stability of your other cannabinoids unless that's a claim on your label. If you claim it on your label, then you have to look for shelf life of those other components.
That's probably the Santa lab that comes in play, right?
Makes perfect sense. Questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is that okay? For you absorption guys. So, kind of, if you look at what's wrong with us, a lot of what's wrong with us is we eat a lot of really inflammatory food, a lot of food that we're allergic to. There's a lot of variability, I guess, in what I'm in gut health, right? So how do you kind of account for that variability in gut health when you're doing your pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics and everything?
Well, that's a great question. Like I mentioned before, every single person have a completely different system going on, right? Like you said, the food we consume is probably not the best. It's quite inflammatory in many, many different ways. So I honestly say that when you approach to these products, you need to don't go by what your cousin tell you it would work, or your brother tell you, oh, look, use this much, it works wonderful. You have to be very cautious about what you're going to do with this supplement, because first of all, you don't know what's going to do to your body. So I would say don't just go blind and just try whatever. I mean, try to do a little bit of research. This is a whole new field, I would say, for consumers mainly. And even for us scientists or people who've been on the market, every day something new comes up. And so it becomes really difficult for us to start like putting A, B, and C together for some final product that you're all gonna consume when we don't know that kind of effect. So I honestly would answer straight the question. If I would develop a new product, I would just go with somebody that can actually get me insight on pharmacokinetics and bioavailability or pharmacodynamics, whatever this product might be. Or if it's a well-known product, then do your research and try to find what people have reported about those products. So then you can have a better idea what you're getting into. Putting a new product in the market, which is actually a supplement, is not that easy. We don't know what's the effect that's gonna cause the general population, and it might be 1 or 2 of a million group that they might have a not good effect for whatever reasons, right? Especially for what they're doing with their intake food, their body, their diet, if their exercise, there are so many different possibilities. So and there's studies, like clinical studies, bioavailability, all this pharmacokinetics, and I guess that's what I can approach you. Thank you. What do you, anybody else?
Excellent, that was good, and I think we're coming up on 1:15, so unless there's any other questions, I think the panelists probably will stay back a little bit and answer any questions kind of off the side here. We got to get off the podium here, but I want to thank everybody for your participation and attendance, and that this is a very educational, hopefully, for everyone. Excellent. And if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to explain what we know. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.